The first time I heard about Hollow Bay was through a Reddit post that had been deleted within hours of being uploaded. I only saw it because I'd been browsing at 3 in the morning, unable to sleep, scrolling through obscure internet mysteries and unsolved disappearances. The post was titled, "My grandmother's town doesn't exist anymore, but I can still hear it broadcasting." I took a screenshot before it vanished. The user, someone called u/static memories, claimed their grandmother had lived in a coastal town in Northern California that had been abandoned in 1987. Not evacuated due to natural disaster, not slowly depopulated by economic decline, just abandoned. One day it was there, the next day everyone was gone. The post included coordinates and a strange detail. If you tuned an AM radio to 1640 kilohertz within a 50-mile radius of those coordinates, you could still hear broadcasts from the town. Voices, music, emergency announcements that never stopped. I'm a researcher by trade, specializing in media archaeology and dead formats. I've spent years tracking down lost films, forgotten television broadcasts, and obsolete audio formats. The idea of a phantom radio station still broadcasting from a town that no longer existed was exactly the kind of mystery that consumed me. So, 3 weeks after seeing that post, I loaded my car with recording equipment, camping gear, and enough supplies for a week, and I drove north along the Pacific Coast Highway toward the coordinates u/static memories had provided. The drive took 2 days. I left San Francisco on a gray Tuesday morning and followed Highway 1 as it curved along the cliffs, the ocean spreading out to my left like hammered pewter. The further north I went, the fewer cars I passed. Towns became sparse, then sporadic. Gas stations grew rare enough that I had to plan my stops carefully. The landscape changed gradually. The touristy charm of the coastal villages gave way to something more isolated, more severe. The forests pressed closer to the road. The towns I did pass through had that hollow feeling of places where more people leave than arrive. Boarded-up storefronts, churches with fading paint, motels with only 2 or 3 cars in their lots. I spent the first night in a town called Mercy Point, population 343 according to a weathered sign. The motel was called the Surfside Inn, though the ocean was a mile away and I doubted anyone had surfed there in decades. The woman at the desk was in her 70s, with clouded eyes and hands that trembled as she took my credit card. "Passing through?" I said, "Research trip. I'm looking into some local history." She nodded slowly, processing the card with a machine that looked older than I was. "Not much history around here, just people trying to forget." I wanted to ask what she meant, but something about her expression stopped me. She handed me a key attached to a plastic diamond that said Room 7. "Radio doesn't work so good up here," she said as I turned to leave. "All static, mostly. Plays tricks on you." My room smelled of mildew and ancient cigarettes. The bed sagged in the middle. The television only got 3 channels, and the heater rattled like something was trapped inside it. I lay awake most of the night, listening to the wind outside and the occasional car passing on the highway. At some point, I must have dozed off because I awoke to the sound of music. Old music, a big band arrangement of something I half recognized. I sat up in the darkness, disoriented, trying to locate the source. Then I realized it was coming from the radio on the nightstand, a radio I hadn't turned on. I reached over and switched it off. The music stopped. I checked the dial, 1640 AM. I didn't sleep much after that. The next morning I continued north. According to my GPS, I was getting close to the coordinates, but the digital map showed nothing but forest and coastline. No towns, no roads leading inland. Just the highway threading along the edge of the continent. Around noon, I passed a scenic overlook and pulled off. Below me, the ocean crashed against black rocks. Above, gulls wheeled in the gray sky. I checked the coordinates again. I should be almost on top of Hollow Bay. That's when I noticed the road. It wasn't on any map, not even the old paper ones I'd brought as backup. It was barely more than a service road, really cracked asphalt disappearing into the trees about a quarter-mile back from where I'd pulled over. There was no sign, no indication of where it led. But when I checked my GPS, the road pointed directly toward the coordinates. I sat in the car for 10 minutes arguing with myself. Everything about this felt wrong. The deleted Reddit post, the phantom radio broadcast, an unmapped road leading into nowhere. Every rational part of my brain said to turn around, drive back to San Francisco, forget the whole thing. But I'd come all this way, and I'd spent my entire career chasing ghosts of dead media, fragments of forgotten culture. This was just one more mystery. So I turned onto the road. The forest swallowed me immediately. The trees here were massive, Douglas firs and Sitka spruce that blocked out the sky. The road wound deeper into the woods, narrow and potholed, branches scraping the sides of my car. My cell signal died within minutes. The GPS still showed my location, but everything around me was blank, as if the map couldn't render the forest. I drove for 20 minutes, maybe 30. Time felt strange under the canopy, the filtered light giving no indication of the hour. The road descended gradually, and I could smell the ocean again. That salt and kelp smell, mixed with something else, something that reminded me of old books and copper. Then the trees ended, and I saw Hollow Bay. The town sat in a narrow valley that opened to the sea, surrounded by steep hills thick with forest. It looked like it had been pulled from the 1950s and left to rot. There were maybe 100 buildings, houses, shops, a church with a white steeple, what looked like a small schoolhouse. All of it was still standing, but wrong. The colors were faded to near transparency, the structures seeming to waver slightly, as if I was looking at them through heat shimmer. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was that the town was empty, but not abandoned. Laundries still hung on clotheslines, frozen mid-flutter. Cars sat in driveways, their tires flat but their chrome still gleaming. Through windows I could see furniture, dishes on tables, books on shelves, all of it arranged as if people had just stepped out and would return any moment. I parked on what must have been Main Street and got out slowly. The air was absolutely still. No wind, no birds, no sound at all, except the distant crash of surf and a strange, low hum I could feel in my bones more than hear. I walked to the nearest building, a general store, with a faded sign that read, "Brennan's Goods and Sundries." The door was unlocked. Inside, shelves were still stocked with goods, though the labels were sun-bleached, and many of the packages had burst or collapsed. A calendar hung behind a counter, turned to October 1987. On the counter sat a transistor radio, covered in dust. I don't know what made me turn it on. Curiosity, maybe? A sense that I was meant to? The knob turned with a brittle click, and static filled the store. I turned the dial slowly, watching the red indicator line crawl across the frequencies. At 1640, the static resolved into something else. A voice. A man's voice, warm and professional, like every small-town radio announcer who ever lived. Temperature of 62 degrees under overcast skies. This is KHBY, the voice of Hollow Bay, bringing you continuous service, always here, always listening. Coming up after this brief announcement, we'll have more music from our Community Request Hour. But first, a reminder from Sheriff Coupler about the curfew in effect for all residents. Remember, folks, nobody on the streets after sundown. We're all in this together, and we all want to stay safe. The procedure hasn't changed. Keep your doors locked, your radios on, and your eyes forward. Don't look at the bay after dark. Don't answer if you hear your name called. And remember, if you see someone you know but they seem wrong, If their movements are too smooth, if they don't blink, if they're smiling at nothing, that's not who you think it is. Report it immediately. Now here's Betty Whitmore with a special request." The voice cut off, and music started. A woman singing, her voice trembling and beautiful. "I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places." I stood in that dusty store, my hand still on the radio, my heart hammering. The broadcast was coming through crystal clear, as if the station was just down the street, as if 1987 had never ended in Hollow Bay. I spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the town and recording everything. I had a portable tape recorder, a digital recorder, and my phone as backup, though none of them showed any signal. I documented every street, every building, every frozen moment of life interrupted. The houses were the worst. Inside, everything was preserved in eerie stillness. Kitchen tables set for meals that were never eaten. Beds unmade. Children's toys scattered on floors. In one house, I found a birthday cake, fossilized and covered in some kind of white fungus, candles still standing upright. A banner strung across the dining room read, "Happy 8th Birthday, Tommy." In another house, I found photographs. A family of 4, smiling at the camera. The father with his arm around the mother, 2 boys in front. On the back of one photo, in faded pencil, "The Mercers, October 10, 1987. October 10, 1987. 3 days before the calendar in the general store had stopped. The church was at the north end of town, sitting on a small rise overlooking the bay. The doors were open, swaying slightly in a breeze I couldn't feel. Inside, the pews were full of hymnals. The altar held wilted flowers and a Bible open to Psalm 23. "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." Behind the church was a cemetery, but something was wrong with the graves. The newest ones, the ones with the most recent dates, all read the same. October 13, 1987. 12 graves, all from the same day. But the names, I recognized them from mailboxes, from photographs I'd seen. These weren't just any residents. These were the sheriff, the pastor, the school principal, the people who would have been in charge when whatever happened, happened. And all of their graves were empty. I could tell because several had been dug up from the inside, the earth pushed out, the coffins splintered open. The sun was getting low, painting the sky orange and purple over the Pacific. I knew I should leave, get back to my car and drive out before dark. But the radio was still broadcasting, and I needed to hear more. I needed to understand what happened here. I set up my equipment in the general store, recording devices, a camping chair, a thermos of coffee. As the light faded outside, I sat there, listening to KHBY. The programming was surreal. Music from the 40s and 50s mostly, mixed with community announcements. "The ladies' auxiliary meeting has been postponed indefinitely. Please remember to keep your doors locked. This Saturday's football game against Red Creek High School has been canceled. Keep your radios on. Reminder, anyone experiencing symptoms should report to the community center immediately. Symptoms include loss of time awareness, inability to recognize loved ones, compulsion to walk toward the bay, hearing voices in the static." Between announcements, the DJ, he called himself Tom Brennan, and I wondered if he was related to whoever owned this store, kept up a steady stream of small-town patter. But it was all wrong. He'd mentioned upcoming events that could never happen. He'd give the time and temperature, but the time kept jumping. It would be 6:15 p.m., then suddenly 3:42 a.m., then back to 7:30 p.m. And his voice, as smooth and professional as it was, never quite sounded human. There was something underneath it, like static shaped into words. like someone doing an impression of a person without quite understanding how people worked. This is KHBY, broadcasting from Hollow Bay, California, where it's always 1987 and the fog never lifts. Keep your radios on, folks. We're the only thing keeping you anchored. Without us, you'll drift. Without us, you'll forget who you are. Without us, you'll become like them. Full dark fell, and the town transformed. I first noticed the lights. Through the window of the general store, I could see lights turning on in houses across the street. Not electric lights. They flickered like candles or oil lamps. Then I heard footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate footsteps on the sidewalk. I turned off my flashlight and crept to the window. In the glow from the houses, I could see figures moving through the street. People, or things shaped like people. They walked with strange, fluid movements, their limbs bending at wrong angles. One of them stopped directly in front of the store, and in the dim light I saw its face. It was the father from the photograph I'd found, the man from the Mercer family. But his smile was too wide, his eyes completely black, and his skin seemed to shift and ripple like water. The radio hissed, and Tom Brennan's voice came through. "Looks like we've got some activity tonight, folks. Remember the rules. Don't make eye contact. Don't respond if they call your name. They're not who they look like. They stopped being who they looked like on October 13th, 1987, when the broadcast went wrong and let them through. Now they're just echoes, recordings, copies of copies, degrading with each cycle." The thing that looked like Mr. Mercer tilted its head, staring at the store window, at me. Its mouth moved, and I heard a voice, but not through the air, through the radio. "Come out," it said, using Tom Brennan's frequency. "Come join us. It's better out here. You don't have to remember anymore. You don't have to be real." More figures appeared in the street. I recognized some from photographs. The two Mercer boys, a woman who'd been in pictures at the church, others I'd seen frozen in time throughout the town. All of them walking in that strange, fluid wrong way. All of them staring at the store. "We're the only thing keeping them out," Tom Brennan said through the radio. "This broadcast, these frequencies, they create a kind of barrier, a reminder of what's real. But it's getting harder to maintain. The signal degrades, the memories fade. Every year more of the town forgets how to exist. Every year more of them walk. But we keep broadcasting. We have to, because if we stop..." The lights in the street intensified. The figures moved closer. I could see more details now. The way their skin seemed translucent in places. The way they didn't cast shadows correctly. The way they all moved in perfect synchronization, as if controlled by a single will. One of them pressed its face against the window. A woman, middle-aged, wearing a dress from the 50s. Her eyes were empty holes, and when she smiled, I could see straight through her mouth to the street beyond. "Tell him," she said, her voice crackling through the radio. "Tell him what happened. Tell him about the experiment." KHBY signing off for our hourly station identification. This is KHBY 1640 on your AM dial, broadcasting from Hollow Bay, California. We've been here since 1952, bringing you the best in music, news, and community service. We'll be back after this brief interruption. Static filled the store. The moment the DJ's voice cut out, the figures outside rushed the windows.
They slammed against the glass, their mouths opening impossibly wide, their hands leaving no prints or fog on the panes. I stumbled backward, knocking over my equipment, the coffee thermos rolling across the floor. Then the music started again, a big band arrangement in the Mood, and the figures stopped. They didn't retreat, they just froze, locked in place, their faces still pressed against the glass. I grabbed my equipment and ran to the back of the store. There was a storage room, then a back door leading to an alley. I could still hear the music playing from my recording equipment in the front room, but I didn't go back for it. I shouldered through the back door and into the alley. The smell hit me first, that copper smell I'd noticed when I arrived, but stronger now, like old blood and ozone. The alley was dark, but I could see well enough to run. I headed toward where I'd parked my car, trying to remember the layout of the streets. Behind me, I heard them coming. Not running, they didn't seem capable of running, but sliding, moving with that liquid grace, and singing. All of them were singing along with the music, their voices creating an eerie harmony that echoed off the buildings. I burst onto Main Street and saw my car, but between me and it were at least a dozen figures, all standing perfectly still, all staring in my direction. Among them I saw the sheriff from the cemetery, his uniform still pristine, his badge gleaming. He smiled at me. "You came looking for answers," he said, and his voice came from everywhere at once, from the air, from the buildings, from inside my head. About what happened to us, about why we disappeared. Would you like to know? Would you like to understand? I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't respond. The figures began to circle me, their movements synchronized like a music box. The sheriff stepped closer. "We were an experiment. 1987. Cold War was ending, but paranoia was high. Government wanted a way to control information, to broadcast directly into people's minds, to override their memories and beliefs. They chose Hollow Bay because we were small, isolated, perfect test subjects. They built a transmitter in the hills, disguised as a radio tower, told us it was for better reception." The other figures picked up the story, speaking in unison. "October 13th, 1987, they activated it. Full power. But something went wrong. The frequency they used, the amplitude, the modulation. It didn't just broadcast into our minds. It broadcast us, turned us into signals, made us part of the transmission. We became radio waves," his form flickering like a bad TV signal. "Living broadcasts, our thoughts, our memories, ourselves, all converted to electromagnetic radiation, and we couldn't turn it off. We're still broadcasting, still transmitting, stuck in a loop. October 13th, 1987, forever. But we're degrading," they all said together. "Signals weaken, interference corrupts. With each cycle we lose more of who we were. We become more like static, more like noise. Soon we'll be nothing but empty frequencies, vacant transmissions, phantom voices in the dark." The sheriff reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder. It felt like ice and electricity, like a shock that went through my entire body. "You need fresh signal," he said. "New data to stabilize the broadcast. That's why we called you here. That's why we let you find us. We need—" A horn blared, and headlights swept across the street. A truck, old, battered, loud, came roaring down Main Street. The figures scattered like leaves, their forms breaking apart into wisps of gray smoke. The truck skidded to a stop beside me, and a voice shouted, "Get in! Now!" I didn't hesitate. I threw myself into the passenger seat, and the truck accelerated before I'd even closed the door. I looked back and saw the figures reforming in the street, running after us with inhuman speed.
The driver was an old man, maybe 70, with weathered skin and eyes like chips of flint. He didn't look at me, just kept his attention on the road as we careened through the town. "You shouldn't have come here after dark," he said. "Nobody should be here after dark." "Who are you?" I managed to gasp. "David Brennan. I own the general store. Or I did before—" He gestured vaguely at the town around us. "Before it happened." "But you're alive. You're real. How—" "I was out of town that day. October 13. Drove down to Eureka to pick up supplies. When I came back," he shook his head, "everyone was gone. Not dead, just gone. Except they weren't gone. They were still here, but not here. Trapped in the broadcast." We reached the edge of town, the road leading back into the forest, but the figures were ahead of us now, materializing out of the darkness, blocking our path. "Hold on," Brennan said, and gunned the engine. We hit them at 40 miles an hour. Or, rather, we passed through them. They burst like smoke, reforming in our wake. The truck shuddered and the radio came on by itself, Tom Brennan's voice filling the cab. "Can't leave, David. You know the rules. You're part of this now. You've been part of this for 38 years. Why do you keep fighting?" "Because I'm real," the old man shouted at the radio. "I'm flesh and blood and time. I'm not some ghost in your machine." We plunged into the forest, the truck bouncing over the potholed road. Behind us I could see lights flickering through the trees, the town or the figures or something else. The radio kept broadcasting, Tom's voice mixing with static and music and voices I didn't recognize. "You brought him here," Tom said. "You knew he was coming. You've been waiting for someone like him, someone who could hear us, someone curious enough to find us. You thought he could help. But he can't. Nobody can. We're beyond help. We're beyond salvation. We're just frequencies now, David, just signals in the dark. And soon, so will you be. Soon, so will he be. Everyone who enters Hollow Bay becomes part of the broadcast. Everyone becomes signal. Everyone becomes us." Brennan reached over and ripped the radio out of the dashboard, wire sparking. But I could still hear the voice, fainter now but still present, coming from somewhere deeper, from the air itself, from inside my head. We drove for what felt like hours, though it could only have been 20 minutes or so. Finally, we reached the highway and the voice faded. The old man pulled over at the same scenic overlook where I'd parked earlier. He killed the engine and sat there, hands shaking on the wheel. "Every night," he said quietly. "Every night for 38 years. I come back. I watch. I listen. I try to find a way to bring them back, to reverse what happened. But there's no reversing it. They're stuck, caught between transmission and reception, between signal and noise." "The experiment," I said. "What happened to the people who did it, the government?" He laughed bitterly. "Covered it up. Blamed it on a gas leak, said the town was evacuated due to environmental contamination, sealed the records. Anyone who remembered Hollow Bay, friends, relatives from other towns, they all forgot eventually. Or they died. Or they just stopped asking questions. Town became a ghost story. Then not even that. Just nothing. Empty space on a map that got emptier with every passing year. But the broadcast continues. The broadcast continues, he confirmed. And it's spreading. Slowly, but it's spreading. That's why the radio works 50 miles out now instead of 20. The signal is getting stronger, or we're all getting weaker. Hard to tell which. I looked back toward the forest, toward the hidden road and the town beyond. I recorded everything. I have evidence. I could... You could what? He turned to look at me for the first time, and I saw the exhaustion in his eyes. Tell people? Show them your recordings? And what do you think happens then? Best case, nobody believes you. Worst case, more people come looking. More people get trapped. More people become part of the broadcast. So we do nothing? We do what I've been doing. We keep watch. We warn people away when we can. We make sure it doesn't spread as fast as it already is. And we stay out after dark. That's when they're strongest, when the barrier between their frequency and ours is the thinnest. During the day, they're dormant, hibernating, whatever you want to call it, but at night... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. He drove me back to my car. I'd left it in the forest, not far from where the hidden road branched off. We didn't speak during the drive. What was there to say? As I got out of his truck, he handed me a piece of paper with a phone number. If you ever hear the broadcast again, call me immediately. It means it's found you. It means you're starting to become part of it. I drove through the night, putting as much distance between myself and Hollow Bay as I could. I didn't stop until I reached San Francisco, didn't sleep until I was back in my apartment with all the lights on, and every radio I owned smashed or thrown away. But it didn't matter, because 3 nights later, at 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of music. Big band. A woman singing about seeing someone in all the old familiar places. And when I checked my phone, which I'd left on my nightstand, the screen showed KHBY 1640 AM. I hadn't turned it on. I didn't have any radio app installed, but it was playing anyway, coming through crystal clear, as if the station was just down the street. Tom Brennan's voice cut in. Welcome back, friend. We knew you'd hear us again. You listened too long in the store. You breathed too much of the air. You're part of the broadcast now. Not fully, not yet. But you're tuning in. You're becoming signal. It's only a matter of time. I tried to turn it off, but the phone wouldn't respond. I pulled the battery. It was an older model. But the broadcast continued, coming from the dead device. Don't fight it, Tom said. It's not so bad being signal. You don't have to worry about time anymore. Don't have to age or fear or forget. You just broadcast. You just transmit. Forever. We're all here together. All of us from that day in October. You'll join us eventually. Everyone who enters Hollow Bay becomes part of the broadcast. Everyone becomes signal. Everyone becomes us. I called the number Brennan had given me. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting. It started, I said. I know. Come back. There's something I need to show you. Something that might help. So here I am. 3 weeks later, driving north again on the Pacific Coast Highway. The ocean to my left, the forest to my right, and in my head, constant and inescapable, the sound of KHBY still broadcasting. I hear it when I wake, I hear it when I sleep, I hear it in the static between radio stations, in the hum of electrical wires, in the white noise of rainfall. The town is calling me back. The broadcast wants me.
And the worst part? I'm starting to forget things. Small things at first. Where I parked my car, what I had for breakfast, the name of my college roommate. But it's accelerating. Yesterday, I couldn't remember my mother's face. Today, I looked at my own reflection and didn't recognize myself for a full 30 seconds. I'm becoming signal, degrading into pure frequency. Soon I'll be like them, another ghost in the machine, another voice in the static. But before that happens, Brennan says he can show me something. The transmitter in the hills, the device that started all this. He says there might be a way to shut it down, to break the cycle, to free the people of Hollow Bay from their electromagnetic prison. Or maybe he's lying. Maybe he's part of the broadcast now too, luring me back so I can join them. Maybe this is all just the town's way of propagating itself, of spreading from person to person like a virus made of radio waves. I don't know. I can't trust my own thoughts anymore. But I have to try. The exit is coming up. The hidden road will be just ahead. And somewhere beyond the trees, Hollow Bay waits. Its phantom lights flickering. Its empty streets filled with shadows that look like people. Its radio station broadcasting into the void. I tune my car radio to 1640 AM. Tom Brennan's voice comes through immediately. "Welcome home," he says. "We've been waiting. The frequency is strong tonight. The barriers are thin. Soon you'll understand. Soon you'll be like us. Soon, you'll broadcast forever." The road appears. I turn onto it. And the forest swallows me whole. I spent the night at Brennan's place, a small cabin built on the hills overlooking Hollow Bay, far enough from the town to sleep without being overwhelmed by the broadcast, but close enough to watch. He'd lived there for decades, a hermit keeping vigil over a disaster only he remembered. The cabin was Spartan, a bed, a table, a wood stove, and dozens of radios. Old radios, new radios, military surplus equipment, ham radio sets, crystal radios made from scratch. All of them tuned to 1640 AM. All of them broadcasting the eternal voice of KHBY. "I monitor the signal," Brennan explained, as we sat at his table, drinking instant coffee that tasted like dirt. "Looking for changes, patterns, anything that might tell me how to reverse it." "And have you found anything?" His expression told me the answer before he spoke. "The signal is complex. It's not just audio. There's data embedded in it, digital information underneath the analog broadcast, binary code, encrypted. I think it's the consciousness patterns of everyone who got caught. Their minds, converted to data, transmitted continuously." "Can you decrypt it?" "I've been trying for 38 years, he said. "Every night I record, every day I analyze. I've filled 100 notebooks with code sequences, thousands of hours of recordings. And I've learned some things. The signal operates on multiple frequencies simultaneously. 1640 is just the one human ears can detect. There are others, higher and lower, ultra-low frequency waves that can penetrate anything. That's how it spreads. That's how it infected you." I touched my forehead, remembering the thing that had grabbed me in town. "Is there a cure?" "A cure implies a disease. This isn't a disease, it's a transformation. Your consciousness is being gradually converted from wetware to software, from neurons to electromagnetic waves.
Eventually, you'll reach a tipping point. Your body will stop moving, stop breathing, and you'll transfer, become pure signal. How long? Depends on your exposure. Days, maybe. Weeks if you're lucky. I've seen it happen before. Not often, but sometimes someone stumbles into Hollow Bay, hears the broadcast, and comes back changed. They never last long. I thought about the memory loss, the sense of unreality that had been growing since I left Hollow Bay. There has to be a way to stop it. There is, Brennan said. The transmitter. If we can destroy it, the signal stops. Everyone trapped in the broadcast might finally die, really die, and you might revert. Might. Or you might die too. Or you might be trapped halfway, conscious, but unable to interact with either reality. There's no way to know. Where is it? He stood and walked to the window. In the distance, I could see the lights of Hollow Bay flickering like stars reflected in water. It's in the hills behind the town. About 3 miles northeast, there's a military installation built in 1955, officially decommissioned in 1992. But the transmitter is still there, still running, powered by something I don't understand. Solar maybe, or geothermal. Doesn't matter. It's been broadcasting for 38 years without pause. You've seen it? Once, years ago. I tried to shut it down. He pulled up his sleeve, revealing scars that looked like burns. The installation is protected. Automated defenses, electromagnetic pulses that scramble your nervous system, sonic weapons, and worse. Those things from the town, they guard at night. During the day, it's safer, but still dangerous. But we have to try. He looked at me with something like pity. You're dying, converting, and you want to spend your last days hiking through the forest to destroy a machine that might kill you faster? I want to free them, I said. And maybe save myself, but mostly free them. They deserve to die properly, to rest. Brennan was quiet for a long time. Finally, he nodded. We go at dawn, before the town wakes, before they can mobilize. We didn't sleep. Instead, Brennan showed me his research, decades of documentation about the experiment. He'd filed Freedom of Information requests, tracked down former soldiers stationed at the base, interviewed surviving relatives of Hollow Bay residents. The picture he'd assembled was chilling. The project was called Operation Frequency. Started in 1983, it was part of a broader Cold War initiative to develop information warfare capabilities. The idea was to create a broadcast system that could override enemy communications, implant false memories, induce compliance. Hollow Bay was chosen as the test site because of its isolation and because the government already owned the land. It had been seized during World War II for a coastal defense installation. Phase 1 involved installing the transmitter and testing its range. Phase 2 introduced subliminal messaging into local radio broadcasts, measuring how effectively they could influence behavior. Phase 3 was the full-scale test, a transmission designed to rewrite the memories and beliefs of the entire town simultaneously. They activated it at midnight on October 13, 1987, and something catastrophically went wrong.
The transmission was too powerful, the frequency too precise. Instead of just broadcasting into people's minds, it converted their minds into broadcasts. Their consciousness transferred from biological substrate to electromagnetic wave, leaving their bodies as empty shells. Within hours, everyone in Hollow Bay had transformed. Their bodies collapsed, their minds continued to exist as patterns of radio waves, trapped in an eternal loop, unable to die, or change, or escape.
The government response was immediate and comprehensive. They evacuated the contaminated bodies, 215 residents, according to Brennan's notes. The bodies were cremated. The town was quarantined, all records sealed, and within 6 months, Hollow Bay had been erased from every map, every census record, every official document. But the broadcast never stopped. The minds of those 215 people continued to transmit, continued to exist as electromagnetic patterns, searching for something, a way back, a way forward, a way to exist again. "They're not malevolent," Brennan said, showing me oscilloscope readings of the signal. "Not really. They're desperate. Imagine being pure thought, pure consciousness, but unable to feel, unable to touch, unable to die, just existing as information, cycling through the same patterns forever. They're trying to pull people in because they want company, because being signal is lonely." "The figures I saw," I said, "the things that looked like people, what are those?" "Projections. When the signal is strong enough, it can temporarily reconstitute matter, manipulate photons and air molecules to create visible forms. They're not solid, not real, but they can interact with the world in limited ways. Think of them as holograms with intentions. The minds trapped in the broadcast are puppeting them, trying to remember what it was like to have bodies." I studied the waveforms on his monitors. They were beautiful in a terrible way, complex patterns of peaks and valleys repeating with mathematical precision. "And you think destroying the transmitter will end this?" "I think it will stop the signal from maintaining the pattern. Without constant reinforcement, the consciousness patterns will degrade completely. They'll finally die. It's the only mercy left." We left at first light, when the fog was still thick and the town below was dark. Brennan led me up a steep trail that wound through the forest behind his cabin. He moved with surprising agility for his age, clearly having made this hike many times before. The forest was wrong here, too. The trees grew at odd angles. The undergrowth was too dense in some places, completely absent in others. And the silence, the oppressive absolute silence, reminded me of the town itself. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. Even our footsteps seemed muted, absorbed by the air. After an hour of climbing, we reached a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. A faded sign warned, "Restricted area, U.S. government property, authorized personnel only." Brennan pulled aside a section where the fence had been cut and re-welded countless times. "I've been coming up here for years," he said, trying different approaches. "The defenses adapt, but slowly. I've learned to avoid most of them." Beyond the fence, the forest gave way to a cleared area. In the center stood a concrete bunker built into the hillside, its entrance sealed with a massive steel door. But that wasn't where Brennan was leading me. He circled around the bunker to where the hill rose higher, and there I saw it. The transmitter. It was massive, a steel tower rising 200 feet into the air, its top lost in the fog. At its base was a building that hummed with power, windows dark, covered in years of grime and moss. The tower itself was covered in antennas, dishes, and equipment I couldn't identify. And around everything was a perimeter of smaller towers, maybe 20 feet tall, each topped with devices that rotated slowly. "Those are the defenses," Brennan said, pointing to the smaller towers. "Electromagnetic pulse generators, sonic disruptors, and something else, something that makes you want to turn around, makes you forget why you came. Psychic warfare tech, experimental stuff even back in the 80s. How do we get past them?" He pulled a device from his backpack, a metal box covered with dials and switches wired to a vest made of copper mesh. "Faraday cage, partially. Disrupts their targeting. It's not perfect, but it helps. I made 2. He handed me the second vest. We put them on, and immediately I felt a shift, like pressure releasing from inside my skull. The constant hum of KHBY that had been in my head since leaving Hollow Bay faded to a whisper. "The signal can't penetrate the mesh fully," Brennan explained,
But we need to move fast. The longer we're in range, the more the defenses will adapt. We approached the perimeter. As we crossed an invisible threshold, the smaller towers began to move, tracking us. A high-pitched whine filled the air, so loud it made my teeth ache. Brennan grabbed my arm and pulled me forward, running toward the main building. Something hit me, not physically but mentally. A wave of wrongness, of don't belong here, of turn back now. My legs wanted to stop, to reverse direction. My mind screamed that this was a mistake, that we were in danger, that we needed to flee. But Brennan kept pulling me forward, and I forced myself to keep moving. The whine increased in pitch. My vision blurred. I tasted copper and smelled burning ozone.